Each week I will be answering a number of your questions from the 3-2-1 assignments that you did. Don't worry, I'm not going to be calling any names out or anything. It's going to be fine. Sorry, Tansy wants my attention. Yes, you're a good girl. And all of the questions that I answer are going to be questions that more than one person asked. So you're fine. Nobody knows who did what. So for clarity's sake, I have split the questions into two types. I have class questions and I have content questions, and I'm going to start with the class questions. I've got them on my phone. So, can I use an alternate edition of the textbook? Yes, so officially we are using the second edition of Lifespan Development by Tara Kuthar. However, to be quite honest, I'm using the first edition because that's the edition I have, and that's the edition I used when I took this class. So yeah, go right ahead, and you can get cheap first editions used online. I think I saw one for about $25. So yeah, use whatever edition you want to use. Just be aware that some of the page numbers might be slightly off. So yeah. For the assignment, are we allowed to go back to change our answers? So I think you mean the homeworks. Yes, on the homework, I will only grade the final attempt. So you go right ahead and go back and change answers and redo it and whatever you want. Just make sure that your final attempt is the attempt you want me to grade. For the midterm and final, will there be multiple choice or all short answers? I haven't written either yet, I'll be quite honest. Last semester, which is certainly not a semester to go by, the midterm had mostly short answers with, I think there were 10 multiple choice questions at the beginning. And then the final were all short and long answers, but there's no time limit on either the midterm or the final exam. You'll get like a whole day to do it. So don't worry, it will be fine. Will you offer any extra credit opportunities? No, I don't offer extra credit because apparently it is poor teaching practice and we're not allowed. On the other hand, the 3-2-1 assignments are worth 10% of your grade, and they are like the easiest thing ever, so kind of extra credit. How come the PowerPoint that you gave us was just photos with no explanations or notes? So this was one specific person's question, but a bunch of you asked things along the same theme. I didn't just put photos. So all of the slides had an embedded video in them. If you had clicked the picture, there was a little play button in the center of each picture. It would have played about a 10-minute clip on that topic, on the topic of that slide. All of my slides will continue to be like this throughout the semester. Sometimes there will be written slides if I can't find a good video clip and I don't have time to make one. But for the most part, each slide will be a video clip. In the future, I will include the URL to that video clip, so if it's for some reason not working, you can copy and paste it into the internet. Do we use the homework checklist for every single assignment or just the homeworks? Just the homeworks. The other assignments the discussion boards change every week, like the exact format, so that doesn't have a checklist because it's an assignment that I've created for that week. The capstone project has a rubric, so that has its own thing. The 3-2-1s are self-explanatory, so yeah, just the homeworks. On the 3-2-1s, if we don't have any particular questions, how should we answer the second question? You should keep thinking. So if you don't have any questions, then I didn't do my job right. And these can be questions about anything. So they can be questions about how the class is working, they can be questions about content, they can be questions about how do I get into grad school. That's fine. But you should definitely have questions, and if you don't think you have questions, you should keep thinking. Are our weekly schedules going to stay relatively the same, or at least be in the same format? For the most part, yes. So if you look in the syllabus, you will find that the weekly schedule with all of the due dates is already there. And at the beginning of each week, all I'm doing is copying and pasting from the syllabus to the top of our Blackboard site. Some weeks change. The week for the midterm, all that happens is the midterm. Because of the capstone project and how I'm scaffolding it so that you work bit by bit throughout the semester, some weeks there are due dates having to do with the capstone project, and some weeks, like this past week, there aren't. What advice do you have for me when taking this class? How I've designed this class is to make you think and to engage with the learning process. For the most part, you do not need to know the correct answer, because a lot of times there isn't a correct answer. And I know that's going to bother some of you, I'm sorry. But what you need to do is come up with what you think is the best answer, and you need to back that up with evidence from the readings. If you back it up with evidence from other places, cite your sources. If you come up with a really good argument for why you think a thing is true, I will probably give you credit. You might get an email from me going, interesting, you might think about this other evidence. But for the most part, if you give good evidence and an excellent argument for why you are correct, then you will get the points. So that's it for the class questions. If you have other class questions that I didn't cover and you really want to know the answer, please email me. I'm always available via email. And now we'll get into the content questions. Do nature and nurture have an equal effect on human development, or does one have more effect than the other? This is the eternal question of research in human development. We don't know. It's pretty much always a mix. Pretty much any issue you can come up with both nature and nurture arguments, but usually the best explanation is that it is a mix of the two. And depending, unless it's like hair color, but even then, because you can dye your hair. So natural hair color is nature, but dyed hair color and whether you dye your hair color could be nurture. It gets complicated. But yes, so nature versus nurture, it's usually a mix, and depending on what the specific issue or question is, it might be more nature or more nurture, but it's always going to be a mix of the two. What are the benefits of correlational research versus experimental research? So experimental research follows the scientific method, which we learned about. So you make an observation, you ask a question, you form a hypothesis, you collect data to test that hypothesis, and then you make a conclusion based on that data. So that takes a lot of work, because especially in human subjects research, as we learned, you have to design a study, and then you have to get it past the ethics board. So every university, including UAlbany, has an internal review board, which basically looks at the ethics of your study and makes sure that that it is ethical, that it's an okay study to do. And then you have to run your study, so you have to collect the data, and data collection can be very, very tricky. And with a true experiment, you need to have two groups in your sample. You have to have your control group, which is just nothing happens to them. And then you have to have your experimental group, which is the group where you have an intervention. That is where you add in an extra condition, so to see what happens. So in the end, you're comparing the control group where nothing happened to the experimental group where something happened. With correlational research, you don't need to do that. So correlational research, for the most part, isn't experimental. You don't have the two groups. You are not comparing the two groups to each other. And with some correlational research, it's not even your data. You can use public data. I'm working on a research project right now in the sociology department, for example, that uses census data from the 2010 census to look at rates of home ownership by race in each county of the state of New York. So that's a correlational research. We're not actually looking at causation. We're not saying that cities have more black people because more black people own homes. We're just saying it seems that urban areas have higher rates of black home ownership than rural areas. So yes, correlation is not causation, and only experimental research can show causation. I am still a bit confused about how to interpret the political system in the activity. So in the next video, or the video after that. I'm doing 3 videos today, and I've lost track of what order they're going in. I will be going over how to do the activity. I'm only doing it for the library. I'm not doing it for Madeline because I don't want to do it for both. But you will get the idea but it doesn't matter which video you chose. You will get the idea of how it can be done based on that. So just keep watching. Go to the next slide. Finish this video first if you want. Is Erikson's psychosocial stages of development something that can be explained for everyone? Pretty much. So they haven't found much data showing that finding children who don't go through those psychosocial stages, the ages at which children go through these stages and adults go through these stages can change. And in the adult stages, it can be a little bit more wishy-washy in terms of you can be in 2 stages at once, or you can kind of regress a little bit. But yeah, in general, pretty much everybody has to go through these stages in order to develop. Maybe. It seems to work. Otherwise, we wouldn't be studying it. Are there critiques about Piaget's final stage being 12 and up? Yes. So we learned that Piaget has 4 stages in cognitive development: the sensory motor stage, I can't remember the second one. I'll put it on the screen. The concrete operational stage and the formal operational stage, which is when you're 12 and you can start thinking in the hypothetical and philosophical and so on and so forth. Some people say that there is a post-Piagetian stage called post-formal thinking that you enter in adulthood. The thing is, with that stage, not all cultures have that stage, and you don't actually need to enter that stage in order to be a fully functioning adult. And yes, so there is another step, not in Piaget's theory, but in post-Piagetian thought. And we will get into it after the midterm when we start talking about adults. Is culture always just regarding countries and ethnicities, or are there other categories that can be considered culture? Yes. So there's American culture and there's Black culture, so a country and an ethnicity or a race. There's also queer culture. So if you are part of the LGBT community, you can be said to be, some people say that they are part of queer culture. So, and that can be seen. So you can, within queer culture, you have set traditions and holidays. There's pride. There's linguistic signifiers. A lot of us know this, it's slang, but they are linguistic signifiers. There's traditions, there's societal norms, so on and so forth. So yes, you can have queer culture. There's also culture around cosplay. So the people who spend all of those hours making fabulous costumes and go to conventions and cosplay characters, that has its own linguistic signifiers, and it has its own holidays, and it has its own social norms, and all of these various practices. So that can be argued to be a culture. Gaming culture, there's lots of cultures that it can be interest-based. Does puberty affect a kid with global developmental delay differently than a kid without global developmental delay? So global development delay is an umbrella term for lots and lots and lots of conditions. There's Down syndrome, there's Fragile X syndrome, there's fetal alcohol syndrome. There's a lot of different conditions. A lot of them are genetic, but not all of them. Fetal alcohol syndrome, for instance, comes from a pregnant woman drinking a lot of alcohol while pregnant. Her baby can then develop fetal alcohol syndrome, and that can result in developmental delays. Some of these conditions are associated with delayed puberty and altered puberty, and some are not. So it really depends on the specific condition within the umbrella of global developmental delay. I'm losing it. It's late at night. Of global developmental delay. Yeah, that's the end of my things. Okay, so if you have a burning question that I didn't cover, feel free to email me. Continue doing your 3-2-1s, and I will see you in the next video.